I'm the manager working on the management plans here at ADWR. This is Kyle Miller. He is the coordinator, project coordinator for the management plan, excuse me. So just a few logistics as we get started here. We have a pretty full room here. And we do have a number of people on the webinar and one satellite room here at ADWR. So we will have a couple opportunities for questions and comments throughout the meeting today. And I'll let everybody know when exactly those times are. But we would like everybody to make sure that if you want to make a comment, come up to the podium here in the room, or if you're unable to make it up to the podium for any reason, you can wave your hand and we'll bring you a microphone. We want to make sure that we're speaking into the microphones for the purposes of the webinar, anybody listening to the recording. And also for the purposes of the webinar, please state your name before you start your comment when we get to those times. For those on the webinar, we aren't going to be unmuting the call throughout the presentation, but if you do have questions, Kyle will be monitoring the management plans at azwater.gov email address. So if you have questions or comments that you would like to make, he will be watching that address, and that's managementplans@azwater.gov. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. You can see on the screen our agenda. So I'm going to make just a really quick overview of what the management plans are and provide the details of the recommendations that ADWR has in fourth management plans. Since I'm going to be pretty brief on what the management plans are, I did want to point everybody to the fact sheet that was on the table, the sign-in table when you got in. We'll also post that fact sheet online after the meeting. That has just a little bit more information about what the management plans are, a little more background information in case you don't already have that information. So we will get right into it. And like I said, the fact sheet will be posted online, and this presentation and some additional materials will also be posted on the website. We have a website specifically for this working group on the ADWR website, which is azwater.gov/5MP. All right. So Arizona's 1980 Groundwater Management Act put into place a tiered regulatory structure. This slide, some of you I know have seen this slide, and it's not intended to be comprehensive, but this can kind of start to give you an idea of how the regulatory structure in this state is tiered. Certain provisions apply statewide, such as the registration of wells. Certain provisions additionally apply inside the irrigation non-expansion areas, the INAs, such as a prohibition on the expansion of irrigated acres, and then additional provisions apply inside the active management areas, and this is where the management plans come into play. The Groundwater Management Act defined 5 management periods and instructs that there should be a management plan in each AMA for each management period. These plans contain the conservation programs that are intended to allow each AMA to meet its management goal, and these conservation programs are designed to achieve reductions in withdrawals of groundwater. The 4 out of the 5 AMAs have what we refer to as a safe yield type goal, which means that the AMA should be moving toward or maintaining a long-term balance between groundwater withdrawals and recharge. The Pinal AMA's goal, as we know, is a little bit different and makes an effort to preserve water supplies for future uses while preserving the existing agricultural economy there. So when we design the management plans, we do so with an eye of working towards these goals. The statutes for the management plans laid out a basic structure for what the plans should contain. And this chart kind of gives an overview of that. Again, this is not fully comprehensive, but this is intended to give you a little bit of idea of the progression that you can see across the management plans through the 5 periods. This progression was intended to be incremental, with additional requirements coming into play over time, and with conservation requirements becoming increasingly stringent over time. The 4th management period is defined in statute as being from 2010 to 2020, and the intent was for the 4th management plan to be effective for that period. The Prescott and Tucson AMAs have already adopted their 4th management plans, but the other 3 AMAs, Phoenix, Pinal, and Santa Cruz, remain under their respective 3rd management plans. Earlier this year, the Auditor General published a performance audit report on ADWR, and this was one of their recommendations, that we develop and promulgate the remaining management plans for the 5 AMAs. That's what we're here today for. That's what this group is going to be focusing on. We are behind, but ADWR is actively working toward completing those remaining 4th management plans. It is our intent to complete the remaining 4th management plans in the next 2 years, with the draft for the Phoenix 4th management plan being presented to the Phoenix GUAC, the Groundwater Users Advisory Council, on Thursday, 2 days from now. Research on the 5th management plans is beginning during this interim period as a part of this work group. And we intend to begin drafting the 5th management plans as soon as the last 4MP is adopted. This work group will be the forum for stakeholder feedback during the development of the 5th management plans. Looking past the 5th management plans, the Governor's Water Augmentation, Innovation, and Conservation Council has created a committee to discuss what the future of the AMAs looks like beyond the 5th management plans and beyond 2025. When Governor Ducey signed the Drought Contingency Plan earlier this year, he stated that Arizona is transitioning into a drier future and that we must continue to promote a culture of conservation. These plans are a part of that transition and a part of that culture. And as such, we will be ramping up conservation in the remaining 4th management plans and in the 5th management plan. For those 3 remaining 4th management plans, ADWR has assembled a list of conservation program changes. The main idea for these changes is to introduce incremental adjustments to better open up conversation on bigger changes to be made in the 5th management plan. I'm going to list the changes here, and then we'll go item by item into the details. So this first set of changes have to do with data. Some of the changes are new reported data or data quality and the analysis of that data. So with additional reporting requirements and with some audits to ensure the quality of that data that is being provided, ADWR can better assess the effectiveness of the conservation programs in the management plans. We want to be transparent about the use of that data, though. And so we will be expanding upon an existing report to publish our analysis of that data and other reported data. This conservation progress report will include an analysis of conservation programs in all 3 sectors and an analysis of progress toward the goal for each of the 5 AMAs. It is our hope that this can help better communicate both our successes and where there is room for improvement, and can also help ensure that the management plans are doing their job in moving each AMA toward its goal. In addition to the data-focused provisions, ADWR is also recommending changes to the conservation programs. As I said before, these are incremental adjustments and are intended to help in opening the conversation for bigger changes to come under the 5th management plan and beyond. You can see an overview on the slide, and we'll go into details in many of the later slides. You can see, though, that there is a range of changes here, including changes for all three sectors. The first item that we'll detail is related to the agricultural base program. The language on the screen is a provision from the statutes regarding management plans. We know that unreplenished groundwater pumping is a critical component of overdraft, and this provision is one of the few statutory tools that ADWR has for reducing that existing pumping. Under this provision, ADWR may reduce the highest 25% of irrigation water duties in each area of similar farming conditions by up to 10% within certain limitations. To help clarify here, water duty is the acre-foot per acre number, which is then multiplied by water duty acres to find a total acre-foot allotment. The chart on the slide shows the impact here. 342 rights would be adjusted under this provision with a reduction in allowable pumping of over 9,000 acre-feet per year across two AMAs. The next items on our list are related to the agricultural BMP program. This program was originally created under a statutory change which resulted in a modification to the third management plan. The intent of the program was to allow flexibility while ensuring efficient use of water and while also achieving equivalent conservation to the base program. What we have seen in practice with the BMP program is that it does not appear to be achieving that goal of equivalency with the base program, and water use in this program is consistently higher than that in the base program. We'll post online additional details regarding the point structure referenced here as Appendix 4B, but you can see the outlines of the changes associated with the BMP program here. The total points target will be changing from 10 points to 12 points, and to achieve that, we're also increasing the limit from each of the four categories to from 3 to 4 points. There are also some adjustments in the way those points are generated. In Category 1, which is water conveyance systems, one must now serve 60% of irrigated acreage with the approved BMPs to accrue 1 point, but farms serving 95 to 100% of irrigated acreage with approved BMPs will accrue 4 points. In Category 2, farm irrigation systems, the points values for the most inefficient irrigation methods are being decreased, and the values for the most efficient irrigation systems are being increased. Both of these changes are intended to incentivize the highest level of efficiency for water use under this program. And like I said, we will be posting details to this on the website after the meeting. For the municipal NonPer Capita program, which is kind of the municipal version of the BMP program, we will post an appendix online as well with additional details. Similar to the changes for the Ag BMP program, you can see here an increase in the total points targets. So the point target is increasing for each tier in this system, in this program, and you can see that it's increasing from 10 to 15 points for the very largest providers. For the points accrual, rather than just counting the numbers of BMPs, certain BMPs will be worth multiple points. This is in recognition of the non-equivalent nature of many of the BMPs on that list, and is also intended to incentivize participation in those BMPs that are seen as most effective. Finally, here we have changes for the industrial turf program. The first change here is to the application rate. This rate has not been updated since the second management plan and was calculated using a 75% irrigation efficiency. The updated numbers here are calculated using an 80% irrigation efficiency and so are slightly lower. The second part of this change is a limitation on turfed acreage. Currently, certain golf courses are limited to 90 acres of water-intensive landscaping. This change extends that limitation to cover other types of turf facilities as well, such as schools and HOAs. Okay. So I've brought back up on the screen that kind of overview chart. At this time, we would like to open things up for questions and comments related to these recommendations. We will have time for more general comments later, so we would really like to focus on comments and questions specifically related to these recommendations at this time. Again, for this room, we do have a podium set up kind of in the middle of the room here, and we also have a handheld mic if you are unable to get to the podium for some reason. For the purpose of the webinar, please do make sure you state your name before you begin. And if you are off-site listening to the webinar and you have any questions or comments, you can submit those to managementplans@azwater.gov. And we would be happy to take any questions or comments if people have them at this time. It can be a really short meeting if no one has questions. That'd be great. Okay. Sure.
Yeah, my name is Chip Howard. And on your last slide, if you can turn that back there, the third management plan where it lists 4.9 acre-feet per acre, do I understand, am I reading that correctly, that it'll be reduced to 4.6?
That's correct, yes. And I'd be happy to go back to any of the other slides as people would like as well.
Rob Anderson with Fenimore Craig. On that chart, has the department done any evaluation of whether any turf facilities are actually meeting that number, that new number?
We have. It was, I think Ryan's in the room. I believe it was. Oh gosh, I'm not going to want to quote a number right now. We have looked at that. There were a number that would be in compliance. Yes, there would also be some that would be pushed out of compliance and would have to find ways to reduce their water use.
Okay, and then on the limit on turf acreage, the turf acreage limitations for golf courses were based on per hole.
Number of holes. That's correct.
What do you do with parks, schools? What's the limitation based on?
So for parks and schools, it would just be a flat number of acres, limited to 90 acres for each facility.
So you can't have a park bigger than 90 acres?
That's correct. And there is currently one that is larger than that, and that one would be grandfathered in.
Okay. Thank you.
Brian Betcher, Maricopa Stanfield Irrigation District. The statistics on the comparison of the base programs for agriculture versus the BMPs, for Pinal, I think it showed 3.1 acre-feet versus 4. That's acre-foot per irrigation acres. Is that data just developed on a mass across-the-board basis? Because I'm thinking, from my knowledge of my growers in the BMP program, I don't think that's a true measure of the efficiency of the use of their water under a BMP program. They may be using 4 acre-foot per acre, but it may be on substantially more acreage actually cropped than under the base programs. You may need to do a deeper dive into that data to do a better comparison when you're comparing those programs.
So what that's based on is the irrigation acres, which you're right is the legally irrigable acres associated with that grandfathered right. So that since we don't currently have reported data on how many acres each farm is irrigating in any given year, we can't necessarily get an actually irrigated acre foot per acre number, right? So if you have those sorts of numbers, if you have that sort of data, we would be absolutely happy to analyze it, but we don't currently have access to that sort of data.
Well, and some of that need may depend on what you choose to do with this data, too.
Yes, Bill Garfield, Arizona Water Company. I have a few questions relating to the municipal conservation program. So the first question is, has the list of BMPs changed? Have there been any other BMPs added to the list? That's the first question.
Yeah, so none have been added. A few of the kind of duplicative ones have been removed, but the point values have been changed for a handful of them.
You answered my second question before asking it, so some of the points for the BMPs have changed.
That's
correct. So the third question I have is, I think initially the department was looking at tiered rates as being one of the BMPs, and there were some issues perhaps between the Corporation Commission and the department on whether or not another state agency could require tiered rates or regulate tiered rates under the conservation program. Has the department's position on that changed, or is it still the same as far as tiered rates as a BMP?
I'm not familiar with that particular issue, but what I can say is that tiered rates is an option for one of the BMPs, I believe. So it's not a requirement. You can elect to choose that as a BMP, but there are a lot of other BMPs that you could also choose from. It's not required that you choose that particular BMP.
Okay, so the question that, I won't belabor this, but if tiered rates are an option or something provider could elect, and since that's part of a regulated program, is the department intending to regulate, let's say, the effectiveness of a tiered rate program, or just the presence of a tiered rate program would constitute compliance with that BMP?
It's the compliance with the BMPs is using the BMPs. We do look at effectiveness, but the effectiveness does not determine compliance for this particular program.
Okay, thank you.
Cathy Farris, has the department looked at how the reduction in, or the proposed reduction in water duties and other conservation reductions for agriculture is affected by the flexibility accounts?
So flex accounts were definitely a part of the consideration here. What we decided in the interest of time for the fourth management plan is that we weren't going to consider changes for those at this time. So maybe to your underlying point, the farms which would have their allotments reduced on this might have flex account balances that they could dip into. That's not really something that we addressed as a part of this, but I think that could absolutely be a part of the discussions for the fifth management plan.
And will the fourth management plan have some detailed information on the flex accounts and how many credits are contained in those accounts?
I don't believe that information is currently in the fourth management plans, but again, that would definitely be an analysis that we could do as a part of this work group and a conversation that we could have associated with the fifth management plans.
Thank you.
David Snyder, member of the Pinal AMA GOAC. This is more of a comment than it is a question, and it speaks to some of the things that have just been said. We're about 6 months away from the expiration of the fourth management plan, and I find it, despite the fact that at least the Pinal AMA's GOAC has been pushing the department for the adoption of our fourth management plan for almost 10 years, we're now looking at a proposal to modify that plan in the next 6 months and then start working on the fifth one. I understand the progressions, but the timing is not auspicious. And I know that for the Pinal AMA, we had gone through a full review of the existing fourth management plan for our AMA. And in fact, it's our understanding it went all the way to the rulemaking process and was published. And yet we find out now that you're modifying it. And we have a whole lot of people who are now going to be, once again, thrown into uncertainty. And as you know, when it comes to water resource planning, uncertainty is not a good thing.
So there was a draft fourth management plan posted on ADWR's website for the Pinal AMA. We have not adopted that at this point, and we will be updating that draft after the promulgation for the Phoenix fourth management plan begins. Any other questions? Okay, we have one online.
So this question was emailed in from Mr. Peter Krupnik, and it refers to the turfed acreage. For entities not meeting the goal, is there any penalty or fines proposed?
I'm not perfectly familiar with all of the details of compliance for that program, but there is associated with that program for each entity regulated under that program, there is a compliance process that occurs each year, evaluating whether each individual right holder is in compliance. Anyone else? Or else we can move on.
Hi, Carol Ward with AMWA. I just wanted to say that we appreciate the department's efforts to move the fourth management plans forward and to make these incremental changes. We know we have issues that need to be addressed, and we need to get the conversation moving now so that we can also work towards addressing the fifth management plans. So thank you for your efforts.
Thank you. All right. So we have a question from Patrick Cunningham on the email asking to repeat slide, I think he's looking for slide 15 here, with the quotations for the number of rights being adjusted. So again, under that change to the water duties under the ag-based program, we did do an analysis of the statute as it's written, which allows, let me actually go back one more slide, which allows the department to adjust the highest 25% of water duties within an area of similar farming conditions by up to 10% with very specific limitations. And what that translated to was, let me find those exact numbers, 342 rights that would be adjusted with a reduction of allowable pumping of over 9,000 acre feet. The reason I have Santa Cruz crossed out here, we wanted to include it to show that we did include it in the analysis, but there was only one eligible right from that AMA, and that one would have put us into the 26th percentile for that AMA, so that this provision couldn't be applied in that AMA.
Hi, I'm Eric Brown. I have a question regarding the allowable turf acreage under the industrial program. Considering that the golf course number was based on acres per hole, I think that a hard limit on parks, schools, HOAs, and other turf-related facilities doesn't fall in line with that current practice. And I'd like to explore something more along the lines of a type of a ratio of total landscaped area. Understanding that there's only one turf-related facility that would be affected by this currently, with the idea that this is an incremental step, and a much bigger step later on might have an unintended consequence for large parks. Thank you.
We'd be happy to follow up with you if you have specific ideas. Are there any other comments before I move on? All right. Seeing none. Sorry, one moment. Okay. So we will go ahead and move on to the work group structure. I would like to just say that we do appreciate your time today. We appreciate all of the comments that you've made so far. We would be happy to accept additional comments, both from anyone listening to the webinar, from anyone in this room, from anyone who hears about this later. We're happy to accept additional comments, and those can be sent to the email address I've stated a few times, which is managementplans@azwater.gov. So I'm hoping that this section of the presentation can also be a little bit interactive. We are hoping for some feedback on the initial stages of this particular group. So this group is an ADWR-led stakeholder forum for the development of the 5th management plan. Our initial work will involve evaluating the existing conservation programs and determining where there is a room and a need for improvement. In response to that information, we will then develop changes to the management strategies, and the conservation programs, and develop new strategies and programs to help us move into the future. So here's where we need feedback. Our initial thought was, at a minimum, to create 3 subgroups, one for each sector, to focus on those specific conservation programs. And each of these subgroups would be led by that sector's planner from ADWR. So we've had some staff changes in the AMAs recently, so I did want to introduce those 3 planners. We have Saba Asefa, who is our agricultural planner. I think she's somewhere in the back here. Caitlin Parker for the municipal sector. S-A-B-A is the first name, and the last name is E-F-A. A-S-E-F-A. And hopefully I got that right, Saba. Okay. Caitlin Parker is the municipal planner, and then Nolan Power is our industrial planner. So in addition to those 3 groups that seemed pretty obvious, like they would be needed, we thought it might be beneficial to have some technical conversations around safe yield, how it is calculated on an annual basis, how it is analyzed on a long-term basis, and how we might better understand the factors that influence it. So the first question here, if anyone has feedback, is related to those subgroups. Are there any different ideas related to the subgroup structure other than dividing by sector? Or is there general support for this? Is there any interest in a technical safe yield subgroup? Or is that something that ADWR should do on its own? So I would be glad to take any feedback or comments from people if they have any.
Bill Garfield, Arizona Water Company again. You mentioned earlier about the Pinal AMA goal. I'm sorry, that's sort of a messed up statement of a goal, and I don't think anybody really understands what that fully means. So a suggestion is perhaps, at least for the Pinal AMA, to consider a joint, or at least a group that would also consider the combination of agricultural and municipal, and what that means for each other. Preserving the economy as long as feasible, consistent with the need to preserve future supplies for non-irrigation uses. I mean, you know, that's a lofty goal, but it doesn't really describe exactly what that means. So might be better for the ag and muni folks to get together and find out what does that mean for at least for the Pinal AMA.
So just to clarify, Bill, would you propose that be some kind of crossover group between the ag and muni subgroups, or would you propose that be a Pinal subgroup on its own?
I think that I think agricultural has its own needs, and I think municipal has its own needs as it relates to conservation, but I think as it relates to how do we move towards achieving or defining perhaps better the goal for the Pinal AMA, there would be, I think, a need to have a combined group maybe perhaps as a separate subgroup, maybe a technical subgroup for Pinal to sort of grapple with that issue.
Thank you, Bill.
Michael Curtis on behalf of the Hohokam Irrigation and Drainage District. I support Mr. Garfield's comment. The cataclysmic impacts of the next 10 years in Pinal County, I think, augur well for supporting his comments.
Thank you.
Rob Anderson again. I do think that's a good idea. I'm flying a little bit solo here because of haven't had a chance to get real input from clients about exactly what would make a lot of sense. But I wanted to raise two issues with the municipal and the industrial, and then on the safe yield. I do think it's very important to have a safe yield technical group, understanding what that means. We now have however many years it's been since the Groundwater Management Act to be struggling with what that is, and I think that would be a great idea to have that safe yield group. I also would echo Bill's comments on Pinal. I do think a special, maybe perhaps some kind of a subcommittee of these larger groups that would be focused on Pinal that would include agriculture and municipal would be a great idea. The one thing I wanted to point out on industrial and municipal is that we do have within those categories, particularly industrial, they are a lot of different entities, and I think it's sand and gravel, there's mining, there's turf-related facilities, and so give some thought about having some structure where you could break it down and deal with individual industries within that category. I'm not sure, and I've been around these management plans for a long time, but I don't recall what kind of the overarching industrial, what kind of connective common issues there are. I don't think there are very many. Anyway, you might want to think about subgroups there. On municipal, we do represent Rumson Communities, which has multiple private water companies, and I'm just thinking there, is it, well, I think having a collective municipal group, whether there are some unique issues to cities versus private water companies, and maybe a subgroup there too. So that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, Chip Howard again. I'm going to pretty much echo what the last gentleman said. Back in I guess what's now the Stone Age, during the third management plan, and I work in the turf industry. There's just a couple of us from the industry that collaborated with the then director of the Phoenix AMA to develop a third management plan. We put a great deal of time and effort in doing that, and I'd like to think that we did some pretty darn good things for conservation back then. I know nothing about the sand and gravel business or the dairy business, but as the last gentleman said, there's specific technical knowledge for each of those industries. And I guess if you want the result to be well received, you need to be including people from those industries that are working not only on behalf of the industries, but on behalf of the conservation in general, or it's not going to be well received if you just blanketly impose something on all those industries without representation.
I definitely appreciate that comment. That is very much part of why we left this group open to the public. We didn't want to accidentally exclude anybody. So if we have inadvertently left somebody off the email list or anything like that, we would be very glad to have additions, or you are welcome to forward the meeting invitations to anybody. These meetings are open to the public. Like I said earlier, we intend that this is the stakeholder forum for feedback for the fifth management plans, and we would love for people to show up and provide that feedback. So thank you.
All the talkers in the front row. Cathy Farris again. Safefield, I'd like to echo Rob's comments. I do think that having a technical group on that would be important. I think the issue with Safefield, or one of the big issues, is in the Phoenix AMA, you've got 7 subbasins, and some of them are in better shape than others, as you know. And so I think we all have a pretty good understanding of what Safefield is supposed to mean, but how can you achieve it AMA-wide, given the vast range of differences in uses and pumping? So I suppose that is really a bottom line issue for Safefield.
Thank you.
All right, Peter Krupnik suggests that a technical group study ways to update the state of Safefield more often than every 10 years.
Thank you, Peter. Doug?
Doug Dunham, EPCOR, just again would like to echo some of the comments that were made previously, particularly in the municipal sector. There's differences between private utilities and cities. The other comment I have is last session there was a bill that passed that allowed concerning containerized plants that allowed irrigated acres to be converted to containerized plants, and then allowed that to go back without having to forfeit your IGFR. As the department considered during that transition period which program, the conservation program that particular acreage would fall under, whether it would be shipped to the industrial like currently, or how that would function.
I am not fully familiar with the details of how that's been looked at, but I'm sure we will be looking into that. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, Doug. Anybody else? All right. Seeing nobody here. The next question that I had up on the screen on the right side is regarding timing. So because we weren't really sure how many people were going to come today and how many comments we were going to have, we wanted to leave the background information pretty limited today. So we didn't provide a lot of background information today, but that is definitely something we could do if there's interest from this group. Alternatively, I know a lot of you have been around water for a long time, and we can assume and accept that many of you come to the table with some level of background knowledge, and maybe we don't need to provide that. And if that's the case, we can just move directly into having the subgroup meetings. Does anyone have any comments or feedback on the need for additional background, or any preferences for frequency of these meetings, that sort of thing? Nothing? All right. That is okay. So we did provide the management plan's fact sheet. As I said, at the sign-in table, we're happy to provide additional information if anyone has specific questions. But hearing no questions or feedback, what we will do is plan to have those subgroups start meeting more immediately. And and we won't plan to provide very detailed background information on the management plans. We may provide additional background information in each of those subgroups related to those specific conservation programs, but that'll kind of be up to the individual subgroups. So what we will plan is to start scheduling some subgroup meetings. What I've heard today is Ag Muni Industrial, and then most likely some kind of a Pinal or M&I type subgroup, and then also the Safe Yield Technical subgroup. So we will begin the work to start scheduling those meetings, and we will plan for the full work group to meet again on October 3rd. That can be a question. Is there a preference that the full work group meet sooner than that? Or, so my thought there, sorry, I should back up. My thought there was that if we have some subgroup meetings in the interim, then by October 3rd, we would have some updates from those subgroups for the full group. So, all right. October 3rd. So we'll plan for the next meeting date to be October 3rd. Since we have a little bit of extra time here, if anyone has any general comments, any more specific questions, I'd be glad to take those at this time. Thank you.
Question about what there's been kind of a lot of information thrown out today, and I think some of us have to go back and talk to people about what we've just learned. Is there an opportunity for additional input in all of this?
Absolutely. So you can either contact me or Kyle directly. My information is on our Management Plans Workgroup webpage, or you can email those questions and comments directly to managementplans@azwater.gov.
Foolishly standing up in the back of the room. Patrick Cunningham at High Ground. Isn't October 3rd like way too long to wait to go to work? I say that timidly with all the water professionals in the world in this room. But I think October 3rd seems a far way away for a boy from Kingman.
Fair. So that doesn't mean that there would be no meetings between now and then. It means that we would plan to start having those subgroups meeting in that in-between time, and then come back with the full group at the beginning of October to provide an update to the full group, all of the subgroups together.
What will happen on August the 20th?
We'll just cancel that date. That was just a tentative proposed date. Cathy?
Cathy Farris. Can you go back? There was a slide where you had listed some of the things. Okay, there you go. What? Nope. Keep going. There, right there. So goals. Develop new management strategies. So I'm trying to get clarification of what you've got in mind here. You've got another committee of the Governor's Council that's looking at 2025 and beyond, the AMA's 2025 and beyond. And then you've got this group looking at the 5th management plan. And what's the crossover here? In other words, developing new management strategies could also be something that that full committee will be doing. And you're limited right now under the statutes, as you know, as to what you can and cannot do under the management plans. So I'm trying to get clarity on, are you going to be entertaining ideas for statutory changes in this work group, or is this strictly just what can be done under the existing law?
It's a good question. So there is, like you said, a little bit of overlap. Where the two groups are a little bit distinct is that, like you said, we are focusing here on the 5th management plans, where the committee under the Governor's Water Augmentation, Innovation, and Conservation Council is, thanks. The council, where the committee under the council is focusing on what comes past the 5th management plans. So it's a little bit of two different time periods that we're focusing on. There's certainly some overlap because the types of things we develop here could be applied into the future. And we will be, if we come up with big ideas here, if there are things that would require statutory change in order to implement those, we would certainly be running them through the Governor's Council for feedback and those sorts of things. So I guess the answer is that they're distinct in their timelines, but there's certainly overlap in subject matter. And we will be communicating and collaborating with that other group as necessary.
How will that happen?
So ADWR has representation on the Governor's Council. Tom Bushofsky is on that council. So I will be continuously communicating with Tom in order to share that with the council. Yes, correct. It's me.
So I had another sort of related question, which has to do with, you said background information.
Sure.
I took that to mean background information of what the law says or what historically has gone on. But one thing that is really important, and I've said this before, is data, so that this group, this work group, and the 2025 and beyond is exposed to some significant information about where we are in terms of the overdraft, in terms of where it's coming from. That is going to be very critical, I think, in order to developing both the fifth management plan and for moving beyond that. So is there an effort, is there going to be a plan to present that?
I think that's a wonderful idea, and any of the people in this room who know me know that I love data. So that's great. Yes, we will certainly plan to do that. I think where you mentioned specifically overdraft, that might kind of be the arena of the Safe Yield Technical Group to really explore that data and flesh that data out. But I do think that we would definitely be having that subgroup report back to the whole group on what the analysis there finds.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bass Aha. I think I see maybe at least 3 or 4 kind of Pinal groups if we go with the combined ag muni, talk about the Safe Yield. I want to call it a replenishment reserve, AMA. Get some people to replenish. But there's a model that have been expecting for, I don't know, 2 years now. 3. I'm corrected. I'm younger than most, I guess. It would help us because we hear rumors, of things. It would help us if we probably were to receive something about that, because that might inform us in what we're going to be looking at moving forward. And so I just request that somewhere in here that be in consideration.
Thank you, Bass. I am not a modeler. I am not working specifically on that, so I can't speak directly to what the timing is going to be for that model being released. I know the department is working actively on that. What I could look into is once that model is released, we could have some discussions or explanations of what that model says after it's released in this group. Anybody else? All right, great. Well, I do very much appreciate you all coming and participating in this meeting today. I think we've gotten some really valuable feedback, and I hope you all will continue to provide that sort of feedback. I know some of you have people you need to check back with. Once again, I'll reiterate that we have that email address available, managementplans@azwater.gov, where we will, sorry, we do have one last question. Will ADWR provide a roadmap of timelines, goals for the subgroup and the overarching group to reach endpoints? As you mentioned, there are many professionals that have been working on various aspects of water management. I do think each subgroup and overall work group has the same foundational information. So we don't currently have a roadmap, but I think that's something that we could discuss in the individual subgroups and come back with at the October meeting. So that's really good. Really good feedback. So we will plan for the next meeting to be October 3rd. We very much appreciate all your comments. We hope that you will all continue to be active participants. Like I said, we want this to be a stakeholder process. We are looking for stakeholder feedback and involvement in all of this. So please continue to attend, provide feedback. Oh, one more question. Sorry.
All right. Will ADWR be able to provide the connectivity among the subgroups so one area doesn't draft new ideas / new management tactics that may affect another sector negatively? And what is the work plan for the AMAs that need to adopt the fourth management plan?
So for the first question, so the connectivity between the subgroups will be this overarching group. We will reconvene occasionally, check in with each of the subgroups, and kind of ensure that any overlap is addressed. As for the work plan for the AMAs that are remaining that still need to adopt their fourth management plans, I mentioned earlier that we are planning to working toward adopting those remaining fourth management plans within the next 2 years. So we have a Phoenix GUAC meeting on Thursday, where we'll be presenting the draft Phoenix fourth management plan for the first time. Once we start the promulgation process for Phoenix's fourth management plan, we plan to begin work on updating Pinal's fourth management plan, and then Santa Cruz will come after that. So, Jackie?
Oh, comment. Jackie Guthrie with the Pinal Groundwater Users Advisory Council. I would like to suggest that any major planning effort always starts with a base data information. Everybody starts at the same point with all the information, and perhaps you could take that tentative August meeting and use that as a meeting where we could get together again and receive data from the department that you do have and give everybody that base to start from.
Thank you, Jackie. We can certainly take that as a tentative meeting, and if other people have specific information that they would like us to provide at that time, we would be more than happy to do that. We can certainly keep that meeting on the calendar. Any last questions? Last chance.
Well, that's important because it leads to transparency, which leads to political correctness and bias.
All right. Great. And yes, we are definitely working toward more transparency with our data across the department. We have a number of initiatives working toward more transparency with the data, yes. So, all right. Well, with that, we will go ahead and close out the meeting. Again, I really appreciate all of your feedback, all of your ideas. We hope you'll continue participating. If you have any additional questions, please email us, managementplans@azwater.gov, and we look forward to seeing you soon. We will email out later meeting dates and links to the attachments. Thank you.